Hello, and welcome to a Destiny 2 developer deep dive stream. Right now is your opportunity to adjust your volume and make sure we don't blow out your ears with the awesomeness that is Presage. Presage? I don't know what it is, but in any case, play with your volume, get ready for the stream, and say yeehaw in chat. See you soon. Hello, and welcome to another Destiny 2 Developer Deep Dive stream. Today, we're going to be playing through Presage from the comfort of our own homes, offices, kitchens, living rooms. Probably not bathrooms, but you get the gist. We have a collection of developers ranging multiple disciplines to walk us through the creation of this activity, pulling back the curtain on Destiny 2 development. So, let's go ahead and get our guest introductions on the way. Hello, everybody. We'll start off with Robbie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robbie Stevens, creative lead for Season of the Chosen. I get the pleasure of directing a wide variety of talented developers in the creation of our seasonal content and systems, and it's my job to help teams at Bungie share a vision for our seasonal releases and empower our teams, like this Ghost Ship crew, to do their best work. Thanks, Dylan.
Next up, we got Nick.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick Cosho. I'm a tech designer here at Bungie. It's my job to make some cool, complex mechanical stuff, as well as when stuff starts breaking, I make it work again.
Nico.
Hi everybody, my name is Nico Stevens, and I'm a senior narrative designer at Bungie. I work on bringing the story to life and writing all those fine words you people like to read and listen to.
All right, Eve.
Hey everyone, my name is Eve Astra. I'm a senior world artist. I worked on Presage, and I'm responsible for bringing cool environments that the players run around and interact and shoot cool bad guys with.
Matt.
Hey, I was the feature lead and activity designer on. I'm gonna call it. So we had a thing, like, is it Presage, or Presage? I don't know. We had a thing, like, let's all pronounce it differently. And I'm going to just go ahead and do them all because I think it's funny because nobody knows. But yeah, I worked with a team to maintain the, to keep the team and aligned and to maintain the overall vision and all the overall goals that leadership passed down to us were being aligned to, and but that's the boring answer. The real answer is I just walked around and I bugged people, and I was trying to find, like, is this good? Because I don't know. And then people gave a lot of good answers, and then I looked at them like, okay, yeah, well, yeah, that all looks great. And then we find the things, and then we implement them. Activity design, just basically living with Todd for a long time during the project. He was always on my screen, working on spatial design and encounters and making Screeps do things that most people hated a lot. Sorry. And like everything from boss fights to mechanics. And then, no, hey, we didn't make the boss teleport on your face and kill you and take your birthday away. We didn't do any of that. It was an accident, and it was not by design. So I'm going to stop now. I'm getting my job.
Alrighty. Next up, Todd.
Hi, I'm Todd Juno. I'm a senior world artist, and I create environments for seasonal content like Ghost Ship and for Mission Presage.
You did a fourth. No. You did a fourth one that was not a part of the plan. now we're all screwed.
All right. Next up, we got Antim.
Hi, my name is Antim Nguyen, and I'm a senior visual effects artist. And I got the pleasure to work on Mission Presage, and anything that's kind of like, sparkly, glowy, flashy, or whatever, I'm the person that people usually hit up and say, hey, make this look cool. So I make cool stuff. It's great.
Beautiful. And a quick shout out to John Carlisle. He's our test feature area owner. He's going to be one of our players today, alongside Nigel Davis and Daniel Powell, who will be our cameras. So let's get this show on the road. We want to start with a quick narrative recap, and Nico, will be passing this over to you. So Season 13, or Season of the Chosen, started with Kaital entering our system, presenting an issue for Osiris, Zavala, and all them. So give us a quick rundown on where we're at.
Yeah, so in Season 13, like you said, Kaital has shown up in our system. She has taken over the Cabal Empire and is the new Empress. She presents us with an alliance, kind of, and we have some tense negotiations. And after those fall through, we initiate our main thrust of the season in disrupting her ability to assemble a war council. This particular exotic mission, Presage, kind of takes place a little bit outside of that, where Kyle and the Vanguard have both intercepted a signal from Kyle's father, Callus, who used to be the Emperor of the Cabal. So we both jump into our ships and scurry off into space to find what the Glykon, the ship that has sent the distress signal, holds for us.
Beautiful. Really quick, too, we want to talk about the purpose of the mission just from a goals standpoint. Robbie and Matt, can you run us through some of the goals that y'all had when starting to create this wonderful piece of content?
Definitely. So something to consider anytime we're building our releases is that the best ideas come from collaboration within the team and not from an individual source. And I mentioned this before diving into goals because actually one of our core themes for season 13 was ritualistic combat, which you can feel in the battlegrounds and proving ground strike if you have played that content. So originally, this mission was going to be a derelict Cabal ship in space run by loyalist Callus, basically a gladiatorial arena that they have basically like set up shop in Callus's absence in the system. But during this time, while we were concepting the release, we were missing something. And that something we were missing was the influence of the darkness on our world outside of Europa, the main destination we featured in Beyond Light. And so this is something we were feeling strongly kind of as a leadership group as we were entering production, developing the season. And at the same time, many of the people on this call and across the studio were also feeling strongly that we were kind of missing something weirder, something spookier, something that aligned more with the darkness and trying to understand how different entities in the universe are trying to wield it and what that means for our universe. And so the team was already discussing ideas for the Ghost Ship inspired by some of this D1 concept art that we're looking at and horror films across media and multiple other sources of inspiration. And so with that, we wanted to give players a new place to explore things they've maybe seen before, but through a different lens. We wanted to surprise and delight them with a secret exotic mission in the vein of Whisper and Zero Hour that challenges their prowess, agility, and minds and tells the story of Callus and Kyatal. I'm going to pass it to Matt now to talk more about the player experience. Those are high-level goals. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of us were wrapping up during just right in the start of the pandemic. Like we a good handful of us were finishing up season of Arrivals. We were like past 2.5-3 months when we started like pre-production, and by the time like things were still kind of surreal, but they didn't really sink in. By the time we finished and we were just we came up for air, looked around, I'm like, well, this is weird, this sucks, and like we just finished off like a thing like alluding to the darkness and what was to come with that, and we all just kind of wanted to kind of sink into a story and try to do something similar to what we've done in the past, but in terms of a secret mission, secret exotic, Whisper, Outbreak, it was a very ambitious goal that we kind of set for ourselves, and but it it was kind of teed up for us because it was the opportunity space for like what can we do that's weird. Like things just kind of came out, and we were like, let's do it, let's just do it, and everybody got real excited, and we did, and there were a lot of risks, but we checked ourselves, made sure that we were having fun, and we weren't gonna be overscoping. We're gonna come out of this healthy. There's so many areas, there's so many unknown variables. Especially this is the first project that we were starting from home, and but we wanted to have fun and get weird. We really wanted to get weird because that's the world's on fire, right? So that was our goals, and it was an amazing team.
Beautiful. So I think we can get this activity started up. Let's go ahead and join our brave fire team. And they are met with the first challenge of this activity, which is a very large door. Looks like we're going to have to go around the outside and break in, right? Eve, Todd, can you talk about how players are going to be getting into this and kind of how you were inspired to introduce this little encounter?
So one of my ideas for like kind of beginning this activity, like any horror situation in media or like any type of horror, like the setup is always, partly like the most important thing of your horror experience. So you're finding this derelict ship out in the middle of space. One thing that we kind of want to do when you first start the mission is we want to set a precedent for like what is expected of the player for the entire duration of the mission. And part of that is presenting them with that they're not going to be going into this ship from the beginning from the way that's intended, and that's going to kind of set your expectations of like, oh, this is going to be a different kind of mission. It's not going to play as linear as we're used to. It's going to be kind of weird. We're going to get into weird situations. So I really like this big door right into your face because everyone runs up to it expecting it to open and then has to kind of stop and turn around and start looking around and figure out some other way to kind of break in. So that was really fun to kind of set up. And yeah, I worked a lot on the 0 hour mission. So I had a lot of these like really long jumpy sections were kind of still present in my mind. During the development, we had a lot of different ideas about the intro of getting onto this ship. One of them being potentially landing out on kind of an asteroid field or like an asteroid belt, and then jumping across asteroids before you're so you get like a vista of the ship before working your way and moving into the ship. We eventually went against that because we wanted to focus more on the ship itself, and just kind of let everything sink in to that experience as a whole. And I think through that we came up with more interesting things like this spacewalk on the outside. And part of that, a really important thing of building this entire mission was making sure that it all has these distinct beats. And I really early sketched out this breakdown map on an old D1 like Cabal ship illustration, just kind of like establishing like where we want different sections, different beats of the experience, and kind of having a breakout like this really early in development helped all the various teams kind of look at the experience and decide like what was going to be filling these different sections. And we went back and forth. Like I said, there was originally like some asteroid belt kind of like idea that you'd be jumping across at the beginning, but everything eventually just kind of honed in onto just this ship. And I think it made the experience a lot stronger. So the first beat was all about like, just like this mystery and this silence. Where's the crew? Like questions like that kind of rising. The second beat, you've like fully entered the ship and it's about descending into like the bowels of the ship. The third beat, we knew that we wanted to start the largest section of combat. So I left, just a very large open area where I knew that we would have a very large combat beat. The fourth beat and onwards, became a little bit more fuzzy in these like early stages. We just kind of had these like very base level ideas at this point of like what we were going to do. The fourth beat, I was thinking we would potentially do an ascent, and we'll kind of get to that later and how that whole beat changed, just because we had a long descent. The fifth beat, we knew we wanted the boss, and the sixth beat, we wanted to have a whole section, just a whole fresh beat, just for taking in the reward room and kind of like wrapping up the experience.
Beautiful. And it's looking like this intro also gave you an opportunity to really set the stage for the theme, with things starting to grow off the walls, the lighting getting kind of creepy as you go through all these vents and such. Let's see here.
Yeah. It was really fun getting into that and working on this initial setup. Like I said, I think one of my favorite parts of like how we all were able to execute on this intro is like it is that growing question of like where's the crew, because you are finding this derelict Cabal spaceship out in the middle of nowhere, and you're expecting to the doors to fly open, and you're gonna have like a big Destiny combat experience, and there's gonna be Cabal warriors ready to gun you down, and they're not here. And so you kind of have that growing question throughout this whole first experience. That was really exciting to see how all the different teams were able to play into that with like audio, also adding in just like very quiet, groaning, spooky vibe in this whole intro area. Oh, also this switch.
Big shout out to the switch to help me catch up when I fail all my jumps at the beginning.
This is for everyone that could not make the jumps in the beginning. And also it's just cool because I like any moment that we can add into the game that really adds context to what part of the space that you're interacting with, where it's like, oh, this is the way that people usually came in, but we had to go around this long way in order to get in.
Yeah, it's just a cool thing. Whether you use it as a like help your buddies out or not, it's just cool seeing like, oh, that's where I just was, like a Dark Souls kind of moment.
And seeing the,
nice
seeing the
like
ship outside,
contextualizing.
and seeing the ships outside when you open the door is a great example of like teams that aren't here, people that aren't here, that ideas came from everywhere, and that was that came from outside the team, and it just, that alone just added a lot. Just seeing your ship parked there, you open the door, I'm like, oh, I get it. Yeah, that's cool.
So it's looking like we've made it through the door, and we're at our next challenge, which is another door. And Tim, can you talk about the development of this beautiful, seemingly tasty and smelly thing that we're looking at?
Sure. So this is basically a door barrier. It kind of started off as this thing where, like, I think it was Nick who came up to me and said, "Hey, I have this thing where if you pop this whatever MacGuffin thing, then you'll be able to walk through the doors and whatnot." And I was collaborating with Todd heavily, trying to like get these things working. And we're just initially trying to figure out what is this thing. So we started off with with giant like blockers, just like growth and stuff in front of it. Then we started talking about like how we can make them appear and disappear. So we're iterating on like having this kind of like ethereal, ghost-like appearance as you like got the status effect on top of yourself. And then eventually started like narrowing down to like going towards a visual language that was more like a membrane, more of like going to the kind of an otherworldly area as you're going through the threshold. So just like really nailing down that experience and really feeling like you're kind of going through this premise of like something's really off, it's almost paranormal. That was like kind of like a real fun thing to do. And then on top of that, we just made it receive a bit of damage here and there. It was great.
Yeah, I remember the initial version that I worked up was like just a generic sphere and a wall that you would be able to walk through. And we had kind of talked about do we want this to be something more natural? Do we want this to be like a canister that they were harvesting on the ship? And your first pass of bringing it into like an actual visual aspect really just brought the whole thing alive. And like, I mean, I think that first run through was we tweaked it and improved it from there. But that like core, those pustules and general shape of it really, like you managed to get that in a pretty quick stroke.
Yeah, I remember at one point, like we were really excited to be able to reuse like a lot of these plants that we had before. A lot of it is just that they just look really cool. So Todd did a really good job of just like dressing it up and everything. So a lot of it was just like the idea of like how we tie these things into this overarching theme. So Todd like made it like these kind of like spore pods and whatnot. And I was thinking, oh man, how am I going to make this work? Like how am I going to make this thing like look cool, feel cool, just have this kind of like eerie like liveliness to it. So I was iterating a bunch, trying to like get everything working together, kind of this like idea of spores, like emanating, and try to get that to the player. And just through a bunch of iteration, eventually we just got there. It took a while.
Yeah, it was a good like back and forth between me, Nick, and Tim. Nick got it working. I supplied and Tim with some stuff. He made it better, and we just tweaked it from there. We had 2 different door sizes. There's like a big one and a small one just for practicality. So we just use those 2 everywhere, and this is what we came up with.
I think one of the most exciting things about starting. Sorry. I think one of the most exciting things about starting some of these like environments is working closely with the narrative team to kind of hone in on these themes, and it helps us kind of figure out what sort of like structural beats and themes that we want to build out. And I remember very early when, I don't exactly remember where the idea came from, but incorporating the not exactly darkness plants, but the darkness attracted plants that were behind Drifter in like his Gambit cryo room, and incorporating that palette and expanding upon that and building that into like an environment. There was something about that really started to sell like the artists and everyone on like this entire experience, that we were going to get to like have this derelict ship out in space overgrown with like goo. And speaking of crossing throreshold and answering the question of where's the crew, I think another really crucial moment was setting that up here. After this first reveal of teaching the player how to use the pods, you step directly into this room where you find pieces of the crew. And that was a pretty important beat from very early on. We had Dead Cabal kind of like scattered here. We knew we wanted to have that kind of moment. That was really fun. They were in there the entire time, and I'm really glad that landed, and a lot of people kind of like rallied around that.
I remember for a while we weren't even sure if we were.
This is also the moment where like the story kind of takes off too, right? Because up until you see these Cabal, you're kind of like, oh, like Eve said earlier, I'm going to this Cabal ship, I'm going to kick in the door, I'm going to get in a gunfight with some Cabal. Standard stuff. And you walk through that first spore door and see the Cabal strung up, and suddenly it's an entirely different experience. You don't really know what you're getting into at that point.
Yeah, this room was important. Sorry, go ahead, Eve. Or Nick. Sorry, that was Nick. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, it gives that feeling of something's been here already, and we're not quite sure what we're going to get ourselves into.
Yeah, everything Nick, Nico, and Eve are talking about, and Todd, were really important. This room basically needed to represent for our team a vertical slice, or basically what we knew the experience was going to become across the entire Ghost ship, and this room needed to prove that out. And so I remember the first time I actually walked into this room, saw the Cabal strung up within plants, saw the horror door we're looking at right now with the face that's trying to eat you. And I remember just having this moment where I was confident in the direction the team was heading in. But when I saw this all come together, I remember just being like, okay, this is going to be sick. This is going to be amazing. Players are going to love this. It's hard to tell early in development sometimes exactly how things are going to land, and I think the team totally knocked this room out of the park and really proved kind of the promise of that ship that came back wrong, that we were kind of all talking about, and then that kind of rapidly accelerated the development and integrating the darkness plants and other things like that across the ship. We refer to them as darkness plants. That's just like the internal name. They have natural influence from the darkness. Sorry, we're not trying to like reveal any lore here. That's just more something. That's the thing that we were just like rallying around when we were discussing it. So yeah, like I love the fact that we were able to bring part of the world that we had originally developed with Drifter and Gambit, and him being out on the edge of the system, looking for the darkness, and then bringing that full circle into a mission like this. This is something we're constantly looking to do, especially in our seasonal development timelines, of how we can pick up threads that we have placed earlier in the game and find ways to expose them. So yeah, very exciting. Team did an amazing work.
And I wish we gave a name to the haunted door. Really, we should have named it, guys.
I think some people called it Laughing Door. I think maybe like in bugs that I got or something, maybe Laughing Door.
I did.
But
I did see one bug related to Laughing Door.
But yeah, that was a fun thing. Someone was like, "What if we have a malfunctioning door?" And then I took a couple hours trying to just messing with the animation that already existed, added like a jitter function to it to make it look like it was malfunctioning, and it worked pretty good.
Pass, even that first pass, Todd, it made me, like, it shouldn't have filled me with that much joy, but I just a room just made me so happy.
Yeah, and then on the ghost ship, like the area that you're going through now, there's a lot of these like tighter spaces in here, going through ductwork and stuff. Like not something you normally don't do in Cabal spaces. Usually, it's big open hallways for combat. So this is getting the feeling of like finding your way through the ship rather than just going through doorways and big hallways.
And you also kind of get that oppressive nature of the ship. Like, you're not supposed to be here. You're crawling through, like Todd was saying, you're crawling through ventilation shafts and maintenance hallways and things like that. Like, you broke into the ship through an access hatch on the side. Clearly, you're trespassing here, and as you continue to move forward, you kind of get more and more pushback that the ship doesn't necessarily want you there.
It also really helps with those tighter hallways. We wanted to encourage a lot of exploration, and while we've had exploration in other missions like this in the past, we actually made the decision for this one to stuff it full of stuff and secrets to go and find. And in doing that, we also removed the timer that normally comes with these missions for the normal modes, that players could really kind of stop and smell the darkness roses. I know they're not darkness plants, but it's the best. It's close as we got.
Darkness salad, potentially.
Yes. I had some pretty early scribblings. I believe this was like, I was live doodling some stuff, talking to Todd, kind of sharing some knowledge and learnings from the 0 Hour mission about how you can have these like crazy convoluted like maintenance shafts and puzzly windy areas. As long as you're continually giving the player a reminder of where they are. So like, I guess in reference to like 0 Hour, it was always like giving you would always come back out on a different section of the tower, and so that you could like look at the progress that you've made. So for instance, in like this room and then these crazy scribblings here, it was for this, it was the giant blocking gates, the like electric barriers, which we'll get into in a little bit on the development of those, so that you could like get in, do a bunch of crazy like vent ductwork crawling, and as long as you popped out and now you can kind of recognize that you're midway through, you kind of gain the recontextualization and you're able to kind of continue forward without completely losing your bearings.
Yeah, I believe we had some concept from Todd and Tim to kind of walk us through this stuff.
Yeah, there's a early blockout version of this that this was like really rough. It was still gray box, and there's some traditional Cabal barriers in there, but it was getting idea across that you could see straight to like where you wanted to go, but how do I get there? And then it's figuring out that. And Tim could talk about the barriers.
Yeah, so if anyone remembers, like, Mission 0 Hour, when we were working on it and everything, like, there's a section where you have to escape this giant, like, crazy robot, Trevor, and every now and then you'd have these electrical barriers that popped up and that would block you from escaping. So a lot of us, like, wanted to just grab some of that fear, like, remember like how kind of like unsettling like this entire experience was? So I just had to like figure out a way to just like kind of not only like tap back into that kind of visual, but also just make it really large, just as like the giant barrier thing. Because even though this is not an active threat in terms of like I'm literally blocking you from being able to go somewhere, it's kind of this looming idea, like this thing that's constantly giving you anxiety because it's over there, and just don't go too near it, otherwise it's going to just zap or whatever. So it's kind of those moments or those opportunities where visual effects really helps with a lot of that emotional feel, a lot of the anchoring in terms of like how players are set up for this area. that was really effective.
It kind of plays
Yeah,
into the nature of the derelict ship as well, and kind of plays into that theme as like, should this be functioning in that way? Is this like the proper implementation of this device that I'm navigating around? Is this dangerous? Those kind of questions are in the player's mind as they're like encountering these like giant Cabal superstructure objects.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
definitely does not
remember
feel like
that.
the Cabal safety structure.
I remember initially, like for the barrier and stuff, like we had like the active Cabal shield type of thing, but like it just looked like it was already too functional. So just going down the route of like more of the electrical vibe really helped. Cement that it's a completely dysfunctional area. You know, everything's dangerous. You really should not be here.
Yeah, and if the players look down really quick too, it's not just that barrier, but what meets you at the bottom of the room. And I've watched tons of YouTube videos of people grinding random things like iPads, and I definitely do not want to see a Guardian going into one of those. Ooh. All right,
It's
I
okay, you
believe
guys can just bring it back.
All this space for exploration also kind of gave us a lot of nooks and crannies to put secret scannables in and add little blips and snippets of story, and that gave us the opportunity to make sure that we could tell an evolving story with Presage, and also that every time you passed through the ship, you'd get like a little bit of the story. You get a little morsel, and over time you'd be able to piece those together and have a much grander understanding of what actually happened here. But it helped highlight that sort of investigative nature of uncovering the mystery of a ship that's just derelict and floating out in space.
I also really love that it gives us a chance to see another side of like, two characters. Kaido, who was introduced in the season, who normally when we have an antagonist we don't really get to see a lot of them, but she has a much more friendly regard here. It's getting to see her bounce off of Osiris. Both of them use some, very poetic language during this mission. Feels very cool and contemplative as you're going through some of these halls. Like, very well done on getting that set up, Nico.
Yeah, and it kind of gave us it gave us a chance to show that like the darkness kind of draws emotion out of people, right? It kind of exacerbates emotional spikes in people and allows, or well, not allows, but it kind of draws that out. And so you get to see a little bit of Kaido and a little bit of Osiris being a little more vulnerable. And like you were saying, Nick, this side of Kaido where she's not Gaul, she's not Kala, she's a completely different, new, her own brand of Cabal Empress, right? And if diplomacy is on the table, it's not something that she's going to turn down. She's not necessarily a warmonger. She's much more intelligent about how she'll approach problems and find solutions for them.
I love this descent into the trash compactor.
I really like slides. I think they're very entertaining because you don't know where you're going to pop out, and especially in a mission like this, kind of being thrown into this very large, imposing room was something that was super exciting from very early on. Like literally, the very first stages of massing out and blocking out this area, we had this idea of this like giant, imposing trash compactor, which is like a really fun fantasy for like an environmental hazard that we knew that we wanted somewhere within this ship to give the ship more character. So I think we have some early images in the development, and it was literally just these giant imposing walls that were like crunching in. And I'm glad that the experience basically remained that, where you're like this tiny little guardian stuck in this massive metal room, and everything about it doesn't feel right, and you get that unease while you're in here. You don't know what this lever's gonna do. That was very fun.
Yeah, this was something. Yeah, like Eve said, she put this in like very first pass, and it stayed looking like this gray box for a long time. But like normally something like that like might get cut, but the idea was like cool enough that everyone was like, okay, this is good.
It was completely functional, and everyone like rallied behind it. So I'm glad that it remained throughout the entirety of development. It was a very fun experience. I remember the first time we got this working, and we actually had the physics bits being pushed in by the walls, and you're running around and you're shooting the vents on the ground, and those physics bits are like popping out of the floor, and those are also being crunched in, and like everything is like moving and being crunched in. It was amazing. I loved seeing that all come together. It was like, it really sold the whole experience for me.
I also remember for a while people were worried, like, oh, it's just 3 switches and you have, it's a pretty slow trash compactor. But once everything's in place and things really start coming together, just sort of the frantic energy of trying to find those trying to process these walls coming in. We didn't want to make it too punishing or too difficult for players that were just trying to get through, but it still captured that feeling of panic really well.
Who had the devilish idea of adding screebs to this encounter?
I think that was Matt,
Do
wasn't
you
it?
have any names to name?
Matt's fault.
Yeah, it's
No,
Mr. Matt. Yeah.
I had nothing to do with that at all.
I mean,
Sure.
initially, Matt and I were talking at one point about if you hit the wrong grate, a screed pops out. But we ended up not going with that. Instead, Matt decided to have them rain down from the sky.
I mean, I watched it a million times too. Like we all have to deal with the choices we make, and it wasn't frustrating at all. Like I think it all worked out.
I definitely
appreciate
wanted
your choice for yellow bar screams.
What I
There's one
appreciate
of
about
my
that moment in development, I remember asking Matt, hey, how are you going to spawn the enemies? He's like, I'm just going to drop them out of the sky. I'm like, great. It sounds awesome.
I'm gonna make it rain because that's fun. I want to see the scream spring from the sky. Yeah.
I love how it kind of instilled those waves of pressure.
We definitely wanted players to go through that experience, like for a first time, and probably die on their first try, and kind of like learn the experience and try again. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah, originally I think the compactor dropped you straight down almost into the hangar, so we had to add some content to like vary up the pacing, so you didn't go from this intense thing right into like the biggest combat in the mission. So we added the reveal of the boss and first encounter basically of the game.
Yeah, it was really fun to get to bring the Scorn back into this.
Yeah, we saw a lot of questions from players asking, like, what brought us to picking the Scorn as the combatants for this activity over the Cabal? Nico, I believe you had some words to say here.
Yeah, I think really early on, when we were doing the concepting for this, and we had decided that we wanted it to be a derelict spaceship, those sort of spook vibes started to come in, and we were talking about, what enemy we could use that would make it a really sort of spooky, scary experience. And talk sort of bubbled up around Hive and Taken, but we felt like we used Hive and Taken in sort of like scary experiences a lot, and we wanted to bring back something that players hadn't seen in a while. So this allowed us to kind of move forward the Scorn's story in the game universe, as well as kind of give a fresh enemy for people to fight, and set up a lot of really fun, cool encounters that rain screeps down on people. Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as we realized we were using the Scorn, like the opportunities really just kind of came flooding forward. Like having Screebs be there as a, almost a hazard as much of an enemy, or the Ravagers charging at you in the darkness with their lanterns. Like I remember distinctly, flames coming at you in the dark was like a phrase that we would say a lot when designing these encounters, and really was something that we stuck to as an experience we wanted.
Yeah, that image was really evocative, just like a dark hallway with, Ravagers running down it with their flaming sensors. Yeah, definitely. I remember that conversation vividly.
So our brave fire team has proceeded into the next little area, the hangar. We've seen a ton of chatter online about other experiences they've had in previous Bungie games, places that they've remembered and reminisced about. Want to talk about how we kind of got here and developed this space? I believe that's Matt and Eve.
Yeah, I can get into that a little bit. One thing that's really cool about the Destiny universe is that we have a lot of spaces, like giant ship hangars and stuff. We have established ideas of like what we think, or places that we've already been. Of like we've been inside a Cabal ship before, and I think we have some early images of kind of like blocking out the hangar spaces here as well. But a really exciting opportunity is to bring the players into a space that they've been to before, kind of like establishing the idea of like how Cabal ships are and how they function. But playing through it in a different way is like a really exciting thing to me. So kind of like using those beats as opportunities to kind of explore more about these spaces and have like different combat experiences, and also explore just a different type of like fantasy of like how after clearing this encounter you have to actually jump back out into space for like a little bit, and you have like this really cool visual of all of these like all the debris and stuff within the hangar like floating out into space. I thought that was like that was like really successful. That was really fun.
Yeah, just having the different lighting and like the exterior space being the main light source rather than lights from the architecture was pretty cool. So it's like taking a familiar space, but like you said, playing through it differently, having a different look.
We knew very early on that we wanted to have like a very large combat beat, and just the idea of like having that like towards the bottom of the ship after a big descent, like in a hangar, was just like a pretty cool fantasy that I think everyone kind of rallied behind for like, yeah, that makes sense. We can definitely have a lot of the space that we need to have like our big meaty combat beat here.
Also, shout out to the Skybox team. I mean, we really want to take a moment to highlight the really great stuff they had for us. And so getting a moment to go back outside the ship felt important to really show that off.
I don't know if you guys feel the same way about this, but every time I finish the hangar combat encounter and those abominations finally die, and I get to jump out into space, it's always like this exhalation. It's this sort of like ironic breath of fresh air where it's like, oh, okay, got through combat, got through the first like spooky horror section of the ship, to go back into it.
Yeah, the first time I ran this on live with some friends that, you know, outside of Bungie, we literally just stopped, all popped out our favorite steady emote and just stood there for a bit, like kind of taking a quick breath after that very long fight. And it's it feels like a well-deserved break. It's nice.
And then as soon as that's over, dead people start talking to you.
Yeah.
And that was awesome too.
I love that. It messed with me so much the first time I was playing through.
Then the voices come.
I do remember the first few streams that we were watching as people discovered this activity. They were like, is that Cade? Is Cade going to be a boss in this? What's going on? Like, that was fun.
Yeah, shout out to the audio team across the board on this. They just knocked it out of the park, and stuff like the dead voices, you know, that wasn't like free work to do. They had to we had to do some work in order to actually get some of those voice lines, into this mission correctly with the right post-processing and everything. Obviously, there's a lot more work the audio team did than just those moments, but I just want to call that out specifically because it's like, oh yeah, we have voice acting in the game. You know, it's something that we just throw in. It's like, no, every little bit is work for someone that someone does, and someone is contributing in some different way. And yeah, I think that edition I remember was like, oh, I hope we can do this. I don't know if we can. I don't know if the team's going to have time. And the fact that they were able to definitely makes the experience even more compelling. It is a ghost ship, which I think is really exciting. So.
Something that was interesting. You go first, Nico.
Just a quick shout out on the back of that was I wanted to give the Lope team a shout out too, because they did a bunch of work to make sure that all those different ghost voice lines could go out and be localized across all the regions that Destiny is playing in.
And including audio testing, just test across the board. There's a lot of logic and there's a lot of conditions and filters that went into making all these lines play at the appropriate time, and that was a massive amount of work with the time we had, and they did a great job.
So
I think
this
Todd
whole
can
section,
talk a bit about
yeah,
I was gonna say you could probably talk a bit about the development.
Yeah.
Like the original concept was like after descent, you have the main combat beat, and then the only thing that I had in mind was like, well, maybe now we'll do an ascent. I think Todd could kind of talk about the development and like change of that.
yeah, there is supposed to be a big ascent section to the boss, and it was going to be pretty open and have like cannons that shoot you like Donkey Kong barrel type thing. And there was like a version of that I was doing, and it just didn't fit with this. Like it would fit somewhere else in Destiny, but not this. So like pretty early we discussed it and just decided that it was not the right thing to do for this beat. And then we explored other options. And then Nick came up with the idea for these one-way door, like puzzle type thing. And he could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so when we decided we didn't want to put Donkey Kong Country into a ghost ship, we started thinking about what do we want to have this beat be? What we need to start thinking about, like, how are we going to challenge the players in this extra part? And so we wanted to sort of take the mechanics we were already using, like the shootable switches and the darkness barriers, and sort of layer them more on top of each other. And we kind of then came into the idea of like this dark labyrinth, basically, that you're going through as you're kind of doing all the things that we've asked you to do earlier on in the mission, but now sort of in quicker succession, more on top of each other. And we actually have some early, quick doodles. This was a drawing that I had done for a whiteboard, just sort of showing off the concept of like, okay, we can make these things one-way doors. I think originally the darkness barriers were supposed to be one-way doors, and we ended up switching them out to be a bit more freeing. But like the idea was basically the player needs to, quickly jump through these hoops, start trying to navigate through this space, and kind of get a little lost while doing that. And that idea of getting lost in this sort of just overrun, heart of the infestation on the ship was really what drove a lot of it.
I was really excited to see all that come together because the from the original like beat breakout that was showed earlier, we hadn't fully landed on like this like real space horror theme, and we hadn't really like fully vetted like how all the ideas play into that. So I'm really glad that original idea was changed, because it just shows that how much stronger like an experience can be if you don't hold on to like your very first idea and carry it all the way through, because it's probably not your best idea. So it was really cool seeing this all come together, and that we were able to like continue to feed into the horror theme, be in these like tight hallways and like wandery experiences. This was just really exciting to see get realized.
Yeah.
When I was originally laying out this area, I knew there was like a few things we wanted to use: the darkness barriers, like switches, and then the shootable switches, and like combine those in some way. And I wanted to make the whole thing kind of overlap on itself, so like you could see through windows and you could see like, oh, I'm gonna go there, or so it's all like connected and it kind of intertwines with itself. A little bit Metroid-ish maybe, but it was just combining all of that stuff in a way to be kind of puzzly and exploratory. And then there was a couple rooms that when I was like making it, I was talking with Matt. I was like, oh, I think this room and this room could be good for combat or something. And then there's a little bit of back and forth on that.
I think this part's important too, because it's taking all the things that the team, right, between the mechanical switches, generators, darkness barriers, and it's asking them to kind of deal with them in a more skillful, a more masterful way. And to a point Nico was making earlier, this is an area where we had a lot of discussion around timers and around difficulty and challenge, and so that's why we made the call for the normal version of this activity with a horror theme. We thought it was important that players could explore. They could explore these mechanics. They could explore, look for scannables, look for lore, look for ways to uncover the story over multiple playthroughs. Because just like any horror film, right? Like you watch it one time and that's not the whole picture, right? You have to actually go back and comb through it and look for all the little hints and all the little beats of like, of when the characters turned evil or when they were possessed or whatever, right? Whatever the turn is in the movie, you're kind of like looking for it and looking for the moment it happened. And so this experience here, I feel like it was the representation of like all those little bits and atoms that the team was coming up with and like putting them together in the most interesting and compelling way.
Yeah, it's weirdly hard to be scared when you're on a time pressure.
You can be anxious.
Oh, very true.
And I mean, that's why, right? That's why for Master, we wanted a timer, because we know there's many players in our community who desire that challenge, right? They desire that trying to prove and show that they've, mastered this activity and mastered all these little skill elements that we've put inside of it. And so, we definitely have seen a lot of feedback on both those fronts, and we're gonna roll that feedback up into future development of this type of content for sure. So thank you for that, players.
Beautiful. So we've gotten through the gauntlet, the puzzles, and now we are nearing the final boss. Can we talk about some of the inspiration for the boss, for how you built out the area and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think originally it was going to be like a boiler room like only kind of thing with the boss chasing you around. So I think there was a version of that where it was like really tight, and then there's like feedback. Oh, let's make it more like a boss arena. So then I did one like a pass of like it was like this huge boss arena. I think we have a early block out for it. Yeah, it was like really open. Like it served the purpose of like a boss arena. Everything like worked and stuff, but it didn't quite get what we were wanting. So then next step was I added a basement to this, and it was still like huge. And then there was a lot of feedback, like it didn't have the right feeling and stuff. So I scrapped all of that and then redid it to the current version, which is what there is now, roughly.
Yeah,
where there's
as soon as we.
Oh yeah, where there's the upper part and then the boiler room basement where you have to go between the two. And go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, as soon as we moved the space into having that murder basement, as we called it very often, it was the boss fight really started to come together. Like the players before were able to just kind of jump around the locus of communion, like really just not engage with the boss fight at all. So having them go into a space that you can't really jump too high over or use a lot of those great movement abilities the Guardians have really kind of took away some of the power and made it so that the boss had the advantage, which using that spatial design to do that, I think was a nice way to make this boss feel different.
Combined with making him teleport immediately on to players and murdering them. That was kind of the happy accident that made everything work. Joking.
Matt, why don't you talk about your inspiration for the boss encounter a little bit, because I think it really shines through, right?
It was thematically for the space and for the combatant it was Freddy Krueger, his boiler room, going down to confront him in a confined space, or it feels confined, it feels claustrophobic, and having that kind of element, the mechanical element of players are down there, then they need to get out, and or they're going to melt, essentially. Was kind of like we ended up aligning on, and the pipes and the heat effects, and Anton's going to talk about that soon. But the lighting and the lighting switches and the fog, it was like Todd, Mike Poe, like there's so many, and audio, like just making all of that work and click and making it feel, and all the audio cues, the environmental cues and everything to make the players feel like you're in a boiler room, and also just kind of like driving the like, hey, you need to get out elements. It just was awesome.
I think the team did sorry, Anton, real quick. Yeah, like I feel like the team did an amazing job of taking some very basic real world elements and putting them into the game. Like we've had boiler rooms before, but like never in this way. And so that's something I remember appreciating when I was playtesting this content with y'all and going through feedback sessions, where like just the atom of the boss is trying to trap you in his boiler room, right? Like that's what he's trying to do the whole time. I was like, yeah, we've never done anything specifically like this before. Sure, we've had things like the Ala Cool fight in D1 and some other confined boss spaces, but not so much that the boss is actively using the environment as a melee combatant to like compress you in this box. I was just really excited to see how that would turn out, and I think y'all knocked it out of the park. Sorry for talking over you, Anton.
That's fine. I was just gonna say that I remember in some of the early versions of like the boiler room and stuff. I was working with Todd, and he told me yeah, there's gonna be a bunch of hot floor plates, that were gonna damage the player if you walk on top of them. But in our game, mobility is just a huge thing where people can just bypass a lot of hazards. So at one point, I think it was Robbie or someone else, or even Matt, asking if we could make the entire room just melt you. And I was just wondering how are we ever gonna pull this off? But after a bunch of discussion, we came up with some interesting ideas here and there. So in the initial pass, it was just the idea that either going to be on or off. So we had to have some visual indicators. So we had to have fire on the player. We also had to have these bright pipes around, kind of to remind you that the entire area is hot. And then Mike Poe basically just hit the home run where he was doing all the lighting. So we had a very warm colored version with atmospherics and whatnot. And it really felt like you were on fire. But the additional pivot towards the end was that we decided not only to have a on-off switch, but it was basically hot and cold. So working with Nick very closely, trying to implement additional effects on top of that, I had to come up with this vapor and this mist on top of it, where now you had the real yin-yang contrast, the real polar opposites of these game states. And I think that the game just became so much better because of it.
Yeah, the number of little touches that went into making that hot cold feeling pop was impressive. Even the juxtaposition from sort of that neutral default state to hot and then back to neutral didn't quite have the same effect. But as soon as we put in that sort of cold blue coolant look to it, it just felt a lot more real and felt a lot more certainly ominous, especially when you're going after the boss and there's just that blue smoke everywhere. It was very cool to get to work on.
Yeah, having
that claustrophobia. It helps that claustrophobia. It helps that the spookiness of the boss because you're kind of confined in the space, and he can pop out of your vision is impaired, and he can kind of pop out of the mist at you.
Yeah, because this whole space was kind of tough to work on because the boss is really big, and we have certain metrics we have to work in to make the boss be able to move around certain widths and heights. If it's not that, then the boss just can't walk. It'll just stand or teleport or something. So to make it more claustrophobic too, I remember we had a discussion with everyone involved, lighting, effects, whatever, about what can we do to make it get it more atmosphere, more fog. And then I think it might have been John Carlisle mentioned, hey, what if we make it thick fog or something? So then right after that we got a meeting with everyone in there, decided on it, and then the next day we had the version of that where it's really foggy and thick fog. So it was pretty good collaboration on that, and it came out pretty good.
I think this is also a good representative of how ideas kind of cascade across teams and departments. Some things in Ghost Ship, started in lighting, and some things started in design, and some things started in narrative. And I think, as an example, this boss, we knew that we wanted to use this boss pretty early, and so it allowed us to kind of construct a fight around a boss that we knew we wanted to use, as well as construct the story of who this boss was around it being a big giant Scorn, basically. And it helped kind of piece together those initial ideas of the convergence of all of their minds using communion with the darkness as a connection point.
I remember.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out really quick to the levers that you have to pull to go down after you turn off the heat kind of inject that coolant. Having one of those in a burning room was such a little wrench in some of our first attempts on this activity. So it's been really cool to see how people deal with that, running in, killing that Scorn really quick, taking turns. What were you saying, Robbie?
Yeah, it's a great note, Dylan. Actually, I was going to have a similar note about that room. For a long time in development, we actually had ramps down to the basement inside of that room. And it created issues for a long time with players kind of being able to cheese the boss by like hanging out on the ramps down to the boss here, boiler room, or just bad pathing with the boss character. And we actually had another designer, a guy named Mike Effenberg, join our team late to help us close out this mission alongside Matt Hand. And Matt and Todd and Mike and I are sitting on a call trying to just go through like, all right, how do we fix this problem, right? Like this is a big enough problem that could really like cripple this fight that we need to find a solution, right? And we're all kind of kicking around ideas we talked about. It's like maybe we throw flame traps down, maybe we drop Scorn totems on them constantly. Like what are all the tools we can do? And Mike is kind of sitting there, newer to the team, looking at it, and he's like, well, you already have all these drop downs. Why don't you just wall it off? And Matt and I kind of just look at each other on the call and are like, yeah, that's it, right? Like we're all, and I mean, it created a little more work for Todd, who was in closing and trying to rapidly close everything. But yeah, we were all just like, yeah, that's the right solution, and it's hitting all the goals of making this feel like a frenetic, tight, constrained fight with a Freddy Krueger type character. And so yeah, Idea's brand new person to the team, contributed almost immediately, which is great.
And let's be honest, the only other option we really had, the only thing like it doesn't matter, like we're just gonna spawn 50 shriekers that just disappear, and not real. That wasn't really out. That wasn't a real option.
I remember like every solution was just like a band-aid. Like, oh, we could do this to like keep people from there. Like whatever we could do to keep people from that area, or the easy thing, just don't let them ever go there in the first place.
Our players just went through it, but I loved that initial, tight hallway into the final open room, and just the silhouette of that boss, or not boss, the guardian we're trying to save. But it's immediately sells. We got here a little too late. Very, very cool.
This was very fun to work on. I remember very early on that it was I think it was from one of the initial pitches that we were going to find the body of the guardian that called us, and he was going to be like gripping onto the weapon and you're taking it from his cold dead hands or something. And as we were working and kind of developing spaces, I remember some early iterations I had like the guardian like slouched on the ground at some place, but it was really hard, especially like being able to message that there's something important in the room that's drawing you to a location to pick up something, and a lot of that got lost, like because the guardian's so small and like he was like holding the weapon, and none of it really landed right visually. I don't remember whose idea it was. I think it might have been one of the art directors, Jason Sussman, had the idea of like, well, let's just like hoist him in the air, or like could he be hanging from the ceiling or something? And I had a lot of fun running with that because it really kind of created the guardian as being the set piece for the like entire room. And I just like how many questions like his body in this state asks. It was very fun, but then it also ran into the issue of like, well, you're supposed to get the weapon from him, so how do you get it from him if he's strung up into the middle of the room? And I think through more collaboration we had the idea of just having it like dangling from his hand, like stuck on one of the tendrils. I thought that was kind of exciting. That landed pretty well for me. I think that was really fun.
Yeah, Eve, I remember the first time you sent this image out, and I remember like getting the news from you and having this image there, and just looking at it, going, "This is my favorite room. This is my favorite room," and the whole, it's just so cool to get that visual when you, like Nick was saying, you come through that little crawl space tunnel and it opens up, and that's just like smack dab in the middle of the room. It's so cool.
Yeah, the framing and then the skybox light coming out. I mean, that was my desktop for a long time. I mean, it just looks so good.
That's a really important like environment philosophy, is like expansion and contraction of space. It's what creates those memorable moments. It's the reason why you go into to Disney World, Disneyland, you go into there, and it's actually a very small location, but it's so memorable because they purposefully put you through these tight hallways and expand the space. Like, you pop out into these new areas, and your brain remembers all of those moments. So the space feels huge, and all of those are the parts that your brain remember. So having those like little cramped spaces before opening up to like big grand reveals is always like a really important thing to establish. Like, even in the like very early stages, you want to kind of like start making those beats. I remember specifically because like anytime we have like dead bodies in the game, we always want to make sure that everything is like all falling in line with like a team rating and such. And I remember sending many emails as this Guardian progressively got more and more corrupted. That I was very worried that this wasn't going to go well. I'm very glad that we were able to have this.
Yeah, and there are two moments in my brain, at least, that live on forever, and it's that first room where you walk in with the Cabal being hung by the tendrils and stuff, and then this moment where you're like, oh no, we were too late.
Yeah,
we heard the distress calls, we couldn't get here in time. So, I believe, we have come to the end of our journey, but there is one little thing to talk about, which is the yeehaw moment, the dead man's tale. If you have a cowboy hat, whether you're at home or on this stream, feel free to adorn it. We don't have any sandbox folks on here, but I believe Robbie or Matt could talk to just some of the back and forth between the teams on like what y'all were trying to achieve with the look and feel of the weapon.
Yeah, so I think the main thing to call out here, one is that Chris Proctor and the Sandbox team knocked this weapon out of the park. It's something early on that in our discussions about this mission that we were like, hey, if the gun isn't really compelling, we don't think this mission is going to land as well, because that's kind of the DNA or anatomy of these secret missions, is some of the best weapons exotics in the game. And so the other thing that Chris and his team were doing was, a lever action revolver or rifle, I should say. I'm sorry, lever action rifle was one of the most requested weapon types or, exotic types coming from the community. And that's something that, Chris grabbed onto alongside the team kind of talking about this cowboy, and that aligned very well with the desire to pull another Tex Mechanica weapon into the game, and all these things kind of just like worked together like Kismet, because I don't remember, honestly, I don't remember if like cowboy came before or after we decided it was going to be a Tex Mechanica scout rifle. Like, I think it was the same time almost. It's really close, weird. Yeah. And so it's just one of these things where we also wanted to do random rolls on this weapon, because we were building a bunch of replayability into the content, especially via the evolving story, scannables, and ultimately doing all the triumphs to collect the ghost. So outside of getting a very compelling, amazing weapon, we wanted to give multiple reasons, right? Like overlapping reasons to return to this mission week over week throughout Season of the Chosen. So amazing job all around. Amazing job with the Sandbox team. I'm loving it. I'm yeehawing all the time with my Titan right now. So Nico, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the story, right? Story stuff a little bit here that inspired the cowboy?
And don't leave out, Nico. Don't leave out the some of our early concepts of the gold coins and all the things. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we talked a lot about how we wanted. So this Guardian, his name is Katabases, and we wanted to tell his story incrementally, especially after the first time you kind of like get the weapon and you start uncovering pieces of the captain's log, which is the lore book associated with Presage. And one of those ideas that we had was that originally you would find these sort of like cowboy coins that would allow you to unlock different sections in the ship to go and get like rewards or wars rewards. And I think eventually that's what ended up turning into the like stowaway caches, his little bug out bags that he ended up stashing around.
Cowboy notes.
Yeah, and cowboy notes. And man, I think we kept that naming convention internally, like right up until the end.
Yeah, we just we just ran with it.
And then so this Guardian was a Shadow of Callus, and here you get to see ultimately what becomes of Callus's minions. You're disposable as a Shadow of Callus. He sends you on suicide missions sometimes. And the gun itself actually kind of gives us the beginning of the story. The lore tab on the gun talks about Katabasis speaking with another Guardian that we've seen in the lore. His name is Galen Tor. And they're having this discussion about whether Katabasis should go on this mission or not. And Galen pretty much tells him, no, it's a bad idea, and he doesn't listen. And this is why you should always listen to your Guardian pals. One more thing. Originally, that where it says steel on the weapon, I remember having like several conversations with Robbie back and forth about how we're going to change it. It's not going to stay. It's not going to stay that way. It won't say steel because originally we were saying, he's giving it to you. But as time went on, kind of came to the conclusion that, well, you're not exactly rescuing him.
So we definitely didn't keep our end of the bargain.
Yeah, you didn't keep your end of the bargain. You're really just breaking into a ship and stealing a man's gun at this point.
Yeah, I was so happy to play it on live and see that it still said steel. I was so worried it wasn't going to make it.
I think what's also really important about this Guardian. Oh, and I'm more than happy with steel. Your reasoning makes sense, Nico. I'm writing this down. We're going to talk about it later. No. The thing that I think was really, really great about that moment too, and something that we all were trying to rally around, that Eve was mentioning, Nico was mentioning, and I kind of talked at the top of the stream, right? We wanted to show how different ways the darkness can influence people, right? And this activity is a representation of Callus trying to commune, with the darkness, and seeing what that influence did to this shadow is important to our game and important to our world. Guardians are wielding it now with stasis and using it for good most of the time. Yeah, I think it's a question we want to leave in everyone's mind and in our own minds as we continue to develop Destiny of like, what does wielding the darkness mean, right? And so, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank everybody that jumped on for this stream, our developers, John Carlisle from Test, everybody in chat. Give some hearts for these folks. They definitely took some time out of meetings and stuff to be able to join us here. So thank you. Thank you, viewers, for coming to watch this wonderful stream. We had a good time, and we're always excited to kind of pull back the curtain so you can see the background of everything. We're going to pass it over to Miss Kenner. And later today, keep your eyes peeled to Bungie.net. We'll be having another article going out covering Presage and diving a little bit deeper as well. So thanks again. Have a good one.